Welcome to Kano Iwanyayi broadcast with Sangwadzi Spiwe Kachidza Mapumo. We're back, and I bring you another ordinary person doing extraordinary work. My guest today is Cecelia Mzvondiwa. She's been here before. I have invited her, and I just felt we had to get her back because there is always so much to talk about when I have her as a guest. Welcome to the program, Cecelia.
Thank you, Auntie Spiwe Sangwadzi. Always a pleasure to come back, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Fantastic. Sometimes I find it very difficult to present you to the people, and who is Cecelia. You just have a whole lot going in that little small package of Cecelia, but just so much to talk about, so much to do at any given time. And I know, Cecelia, last time we came here, I invited you to talk to us about your book, Beyond Tokenism, which I found to be a very interesting book, a bold book, which talks about tokenism and diversity. It talks about resilience. It talks slight touch on racism, but
Yeah.
most of all, it talks about the boldness and the resilience that people have, and how to put your best foot forward, and how to navigate this whole tokenism story, and how we can, we can be, like as I said earlier on, put your best foot forward. And that's not the only thing I would like to talk to you about. I also, in this program, I want us to talk about your advocacy. You're a lawyer in Grand Prairie. It's up in the north for those who don't live in Canada. It's one of those very cold places up north. and, and I always promise I'm going to come there and visit you for a couple of hours and come right back. And come right back to, to Calgary, which is not exactly warm, but
come in the summer.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah. But I want us to talk about the work that you're doing out there. As I said earlier on, you just keep more and more stuff coming from you, and it's an area where, when you talk about Grand Prairie, people don't really think of Black people living out there, but they are Black people. And you were one of those bold ones who moved from BC, right? From BC, where you went to school, and then came to stay in a place where there are very few Black people, and to talk about the life out there. What is it like? And I also want to touch about one of the publications which just came out. I'm not sure if it's this year or late last year.
No, it's been out for some time.
It's been out for some time.
Yeah, I did it when I was doing my master's degree in in human security and peace building. But what I realized 2 weeks ago was that so many people are using it. So I was like,
we'll talk about that. We want to talk about that. But first, I want to go back to Beyond Tokenism. We talked about it when it came out, when the book came out. But I want you to, maybe now that you've had the book, and I've written my own book, and after a couple of months, I look at it and I feel differently about it. And I want you to talk about it again, about Beyond Tokenism. What did you have in mind when you talked about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. That book was inspired by the, what happened during COVID-19, May 25 to be specific, when George Floyd was murdered in the United States. Then I was really an angry Black woman, and I saw a lot of organizations put out statements and, pumping out money on, reducing anti-Black racism and all that. But it was like, a fire that just went up and then down. And then a lot of the things that people were doing was more to tick boxes so that companies appear to be not racist, non-discriminatory, so that the businesses continue. And so I wanted to challenge the world to say, as long as we do a performative tick boxes stuff, we are really not dismantling the racism. We are not dismantling the discriminations. We are just glossing it over, and the issues are not going away. And so that was the inspiration around the Beyond Tokenism. But within that book, I also talk about how each and every one of us has the responsibility to create a safer and more inclusive world. We talk about systemic racism and things like that, but I know as a person I also have my own biases and my own discriminatory tendencies. So it's challenging all of us to check ourselves when we find ourselves dividing or excluding others, the us and them thing. It's in all of us, and that's where we need to go beyond the tokenism part.
How do you think we are doing? I mean, let's talk a little bit about Canada, because this is where we live, right?
Yeah,
Um, we are not only immigrants. We, for instance, we are women. We're
yeah,
African women, and
yeah.
it's layer after layer. And
Mm,
as you said, soon after the George Floyd incident, everybody wanted to even talking about it.
yeah.
Um, Podcasts and conferences and seminars talking about diversity. Sometimes it would come veiled as diversity. What are we going to do to embrace people who don't look like us, who don't talk like us, and all
Mm,
kinds of but how do you think we are doing now that we're looking back a good 5 years now, 6 years maybe, almost
mhm.
since that incident? How do you think we are doing as a country?
I think we've moved the dial in some aspects. I think at least the awareness piece, but there are many areas where we are still stuck. So, this February is Black History Month in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and because of the book and because I've been an advocate and vocal about things, I think I have like uh, seven engagements that I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And in preparing for those and in talking to people, I find that we are still kind of before 2020, right? One of the questions I was asked by one group that was interviewing me for this was like, why should we celebrate Black History Month? How about Indian month? How about Chinese month? How about, and I said, you have to understand the history of this. So, Black History Month is something that started as a way of recognizing that Black people were taken from Africa, people of African descent were forced into slavery in North America. And after the end of slave trade, this was kind of to recognize that they are a people that were, unwillingly brought here, and we need to celebrate their contributions. And so people still don't understand that. They will still tell me, "Don't talk about Black Lives Matter, all lives matter." I'm like, "You are misunderstanding it altogether." So in Canada, and Canadians, they are known, in the world for being polite, and
Mm-hmm.
so the discrimination that we face here in Canada is, people call it death by 1,000 whatever, because it's very subtle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in our niceness as Canadians, we're like, aha, how are you? I like your hair. Microaggressions, right?
Mm-hmm.
But really, there's nothing in terms of, I see you, I value you as an equal human being. We face that every day in our work, everywhere we go, we still are discriminated against. And I always say that us as Black people, we are at the bottom of the pile. So myself as a Black immigrant woman, so there's so much intersectionality that
Mm-hmm.
brings me to um it you know so when you ask me how are we doing, we have some programs, yes, but we still have a lot of work to do.
You know why I asked that? I also, because I've always worked in communities, the job that I had before I retired, I worked
Yeah.
in African, Caribbean, and Black communities, and
Hmm.
now whenever they want to talk about ACB, African Caribbean and Black communities, they kind of reach out to
Mm,
me, so that I can talk about the experiences of that population, those communities, and
hmm.
what I've noticed, as you mentioned, is Canadians very polite, yes, but then to me, when people ask you why Black History Month, to what it looks like to me is try um, to move away from it, or to soften the blow, so
Yeah.
to speak, because I still feel it, but I don't feel that everybody is on my side and we're trying to address this so that we can change. I
Mm,
feel they are trying to cover it. Absolutely. Let's not talk about it so that it
yeah.
doesn't look like it really. It's
Yeah.
it's it's like, yeah. Um it's like domestic abuse or incest in
Yes.
a family. People don't want
Yeah.
to talk about it and hoping it will go away.
Yeah, they hope
And
it will go away.
yeah,
They're very uncomfortable, right? It
mm,
brings discomfort for them. And they think if they don't visit it, then it's okay.
but if they feel uncomfortable about it, try to imagine experiencing it every day. How that feels like, you see.
Exactly, and that's what I tell them. That I tell a lot of my friends because having lived, you mentioned Grand Prairie. It's way better now because I came here 16 years ago when it was really very few Black people were here, and you know, it's what there was a thought in my mind, but around people would like they are scared of you so to say, right? And so that's what the discomfort of, and I've
Mm,
understood this to mean, I've studied now a lot around this area of discrimination, racism, and
mm,
I find that our brain, the way our brains were created, they are created to protect us, right? So to the brain, anything that, and I talk about this in the book, anything that looks the same is kind of a potential safety. Anything that is different is a potential threat.
mm,
And so that's why there is this reaction of, I don't know you, I'm scared of you, I don't know
mm,
what you might do to me, and stuff like that. So, but it's about awareness. People, we all need to be aware of these things.
mm.
Yeah.
We could, otherwise we would talk the whole 30 minutes. We'll be talking about this, and the racism that is embedded in the book that you wrote, and tokenism
Yeah.
beyond that, and what do
Mm-hmm.
we need to do. And
Mm.
and again, as I said, it's more than just that. That's the discomfort that you get from it, but
Yeah.
above that, there is that sense of resilience also, to talk to
Mm.
people who look different from the majority. What do
Yeah.
you have to do to survive? Because you have to come up with a strategy of
Strategy.
surviving in a
Yeah.
situation like this. Otherwise, you sit under your desk and cry all night and all day, and I'm different, and I'm all kinds of negative things could be. What are some of those pieces that you brought in there, in terms of resilience and how to build yourself, put your best foot forward?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question because one of the things that I have done in Grand Prairie here, because it was such a redneck country, so to
Mm-hmm,
say, I didn't sit back and wait for people to make me feel welcome. I said, if this is going to be home, what am I going to do to create that environment for me, carve my own space
mm-hmm,
and put my own mark and say, here, I'm here. This is what I need. So sometimes we also need to speak up and stand for what we want and
mm-hmm,
let people know how we want to be treated. So that's one tip that I give people as a takeaway. The second one is we also need to deal with our minds because it's easy to see everything, to see ourselves as victims in everything, right? So, in as much as we know there has been the history of colonialism, the history of slavery, I don't want to stay there and say, "Poor
mm-hmm,
me, I'm black, dark, and come from this slavery and colonial." Yes, that was my history, but that doesn't define who I am.
mm-hmm,
And so, for me, it has been like I know I'm wonderfully and fearfully created and beautiful, so how do I leverage more on that than the other, you know, narrative that people have
mm-hmm,
been telling me, right? So working on oneself to believe in who I am is the second. It's one of the most powerful thing we can do for ourselves to move out of the victim loop into being accountable for who we want to become. And then the third piece is just being, gracious to ourselves and to others sometimes, because I think for the most part, as a human race, we all want the same things. And I said it in our last conversation that
mm-hmm,
we all want to feel that we belong. We want to be valued. We want to be seen. We want to be heard.
mm-hmm,
So that which we want, we should also give to others, right? So that is what I have done here in Grand Prairie. I'm like, okay, I'm going to dedicate some of my time, because time is one of the precious things we have, because we all have the same of money. We have different, some have lots, others less. So that which is most precious, I give of myself. So when I give my time, I'm like, okay, how am I going to help my community to understand that, we are all the same and we all need the same things. So I volunteer to do that, and I volunteer to be a voice because I also consider myself privileged, right? So
Mhm.
as a professional, as a lawyer, I also sit at privileged tables, right? Away, and then I have to use my voice to stand up for myself, but for the rest of my people and say,
Mhm.
hey, look at us, we are resilient, we are beautiful, we are this, and you need to believe in us, try us, not so those are some of the things I would encourage us to say, because sometimes I've seen some of ourselves, go sit in a corner
Mhm.
and do a pity party of poor
Mhm.
us. We need to get out and just showcase the powerful, beautiful human beings we are.
I think you just nailed it, because if you sit in the corner there, uh, then it makes it easy for people not to even recognize you or to see that you're there. We have to
Yeah.
keep amplifying who we are and occupying the
Yes.
space. Wherever
Yes.
where there is lack of diversity,
Yeah.
yes, you are there. You're not being an Uncle Tom. You are
Mm.
there to speak for the many people who look like you, who come from where you are, and
Mhm.
how would they know who we are unless we speak up?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's powerful, and that's links to you referenced the article that I published. That was my first publication, and I was, of course, a student, and I was so excited that I have published an article. So it was published by the African Security, so it's in one of their journals, and at that time, because it was fresh in my mind. I
Mm.
was just this student of security. We studied war, we studied the impact of war, how women bear the brunt in conflict zones and stuff like that, and so I looked at how I had looked at how women get used as weapons of war, like
Mhm.
rape case and things like
Mhm.
very sad things. And then I said, what can I do to also add a voice, right? To
Mhm.
say men should stop using us women as weapons of war, and to say I think our world would be a better world if women, because in that article I do talk about we need to have more women at decision making tables. We need to have more women sitting at the Security Council, if you're talking
Mhm.
global, right? And then we would have less wars, because as women, we are nurturing, we are life giving, we
Mhm.
are, we focus on other things rather than power. Of course, we do sometimes we do have that, but so that it comes from the space of we need to have our voice. We, like you say, amplify our voices.
Yes, and I think as you said, oh, you wrote that when you were still in doing your master's degree, and the
Yes,
focus was on one specific country, Rwanda. Yeah,
yes,
and
yes.
you just shine in your advocacy for women. Talk to me about that. As you said, you were looking at the war zone, and
Yes,
women, surviving that, the
yes,
war, and
yeah,
then how then do they rise from being victims to using their power and occupying those political spaces and developmental spaces? How why Rwanda, and why at that particular time?
yeah. No, so because Rwanda has, as we all most of us know, we have looked at the history. The genocide in
Hmm.
1994 was a shock to the world in terms of what us, when how things can go wrong in our world, to any country anyway. Not just putting Rwanda on the spot here.
Hmm.
But then, if you look at Rwanda today, right, and how it has transformed and rebuilt and
Hmm.
become what it is today. So when I researched and looked at what was happening, of course, I also was privileged to go to the refugee camps where people had run away from Rwanda into
Hmm.
Uganda, into the DRC, into Kenya, and seeing how women still remain the backbone of their community, even within the refugee camps. And then looking at at that time the composition of the parliament of Rwanda, it was almost 50-50 percent
Hmm.
women, 50% men. and,
Hmm.
and and then for me that was an inspiration to say, look at how even though women suffered running with babies, at their backs or in their arms, and being victims in many ways, and
Hmm.
their resilience and coming back to form a society, to rise from the ashes like phoenixes, right?
It's the power within.
The
It's
power
power
within.
within. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. It's something that's of great interest to me as well. And I kept looking at it and said, how does this work? And the power of the power that women do have, sometimes
Yeah.
not recognizing it, and and not feeling sad and sorry for ourselves. But there are lots of women with so much power who don't really
So much.
realize they have it.
So much. That's a great point you're saying, and of course, as humans, we this is one of the things we were given. Like,
Mm,
apart from every species, the human being is the one that has this power, the brain, the creativity, the ability to love and to form and to build and to create.
mm,
But as women, because life grows in us, we have that power which we haven't harnessed. But my first degree and when I was teaching in Zimbabwe, I taught history, and I could see where women were the change makers. And I'm thinking, and
mm.
I've said it, I think going forward, if we want to see a different world, the future is women, and the future is now. And women, we need to rise and take our place and actually bring a different world, because we have given men this space and the platform, and they're not doing very well. And that's
No,
my feminist part coming out. I think
true.
it's high time we leverage the power that we have. And I mean, in
Mm.
Shona, those of us who are from Zimbabwe, we talk about, you don't want to make your mother angry, because that anger is something you don't want to deal with, right?
It's the power within that
The
can come back
power
for
within,
you.
or the mama bear, right?
Uh-huh.
So we have so much power that we should leverage. And here's the challenge that I give to us as women, that I think we need to move from sitting on our power by bringing our power down, by bringing each other down and focusing on petty little things. We should actually come together and say, hey, how can we come together in our sisterhood and support each other and be stronger and do what we need to do? I think
Adjust each other's crowns. I think that's
exactly, and
adjust each
like this,
other's crowns. Hmm.
amplify each other,
Hmm.
shine the light on others like you are doing. Until you always do that, you always, when I get a message from you, for example, you're like, how's that's my favorite niece. I'm like, yes, thank you, auntie.
But you make me happy. You make me proud. You make me. She does things that I didn't do. The few things that I didn't do.
you have done a lot and you still do a lot,
you
and I
know.
learn from you every day. But because you have it in you, you are able to give it to others. And I think that's what we should, as women, continue to
Mhm.
challenge each other to do. And that's why that article was focusing on the power that women have and the power that women demonstrated in rebuilding a country. I
Yeah.
mean, the men could be seen as the ones like what's his name is ruling Rwanda, but the
Mhm.
women have done the work,
They do. They have.
yeah.
They have, and it's really it's great to hear younger women like yourselves, talking about the strides that women have made, and also, like, again, using the same word that I used, the amplifying that the voices that are within and the power that is within women, and African women in particular. It's so it's a long way to
Yes,
go, but we've come a long way too.
we have.
Mhm.
I remember when I was called to the bar, one of the things I said in my speech of accepting the the responsibilities of being a lawyer, I said, as a woman, I know I stand on, on strong shoulders of brave
Others.
women.
Hmm.
I come from a lineage of strong and
Hmm.
resilient queens,
Hmm.
and I meant that for sure. That
Yeah.
we have been privileged. A lot of fights have been done for us before
Hmm.
to enjoy the rights that we have. Let's not waste that opportunity. I think we need to pick it up and carry the baton and run
That's it.
hard.
And keep
We
going, right? Right
yes.
on. Yeah. Now this
Yeah.
brings me to growing the North. So let's talk about growing the North. I've seen that on your Facebook, and I know this is coming up in this February
February 21st,
21st. Talk
22nd.
about that. Talk about that.
So yeah, so the northern Alberta has, it's a big geography, and people who have lived here really appreciate what the North has and what the land means to them and the life that they experience in the North. So there is this yearly conference that they do to boost the businesses and people who live and work in the North. And so this year I've been privileged to be requested to be one of the keynotes, and I'm going to talk about resilience. And so I'm really excited to. I was just preparing my talk, and
Yeah.
I'm going to I'm going to talk about some of the things that I raised here in terms of the power we have as humans in general. The power in our minds, how to harness that, and then the need for us to be in touch with how we feel, because what we feel we attract. What we think we create, and what we imagine we can have. So those are some of the things, but this is going to be targeted to businesses in terms, and I'm going to be looking at how I can support business people so that they don't burn out, right? So because their businesses are what carries the North here. So that's what's happening on February. Actually, yeah.
It's kind of difficult talking about the Grand Prairie, a place like Grand Prairie, without bringing the word resilience. You gotta have that to survive there. Because
you should come and visit. It's not that bad, but of course, it was tough for me because I didn't have. I was like, where do I buy mealie meal to make sada? Like
that's
to
a
make
problem.
corn when I first came. And where do I? Who does my hair?
Yeah.
So it was challenging when you come to a different country. But even so, when you live in a remote community where you don't see many people who look like you, it does. You need to be resilient.
You have to, and each time. I mean, let's talk about 15 days ago when here in Calgary it was -39 with wind chill of like -40. How was it over there? I mean,
really?
It
was. We were in a deep freeze. It was in the -40s, close to -50s with the wind chill at some point. So it was really cold. I would say though that that that's not the bulk of the winter. That was, we felt that the I think, was it a week and a half or 2 weeks, and then
to me it was 6 days. It felt like 6 months. I mean,
it can be very cold, but I think as humans we are very adaptable, right? So we adapt, and we put on our warm clothes. We have our heaters going all night, all day. So yeah, it is cold, but it's been interesting serving the North, I would say. Yeah, I've learned a lot about the indigenous culture, for example, because there are a lot of indigenous and Métis communities around us. And I find I want to make time towards my retirement to just dig deeper into it. There's a lot of correlations between the indigenous and the African culture. And by African, I mean Zimbabwean.
I was going to say, like, particularly the Shona, lots and lots and lots. I've made friends with quite a few.
Wow.
It's just incredible.
It is. So, and without always being my best, and seeing the Northern Lights, it also,
of course, they're beautiful, aren't they? I've seen them on television, and I've lived here for 19 years, and sometimes, like, I wonder also how I've managed these
it's
winters.
mystical. It's
and then come the Northern Lights, and just
they dance like different colors of light in the sky. I'm like, is Jesus coming down? What's going on?
Well, I don't know, but somebody's coming. Nobody's coming, but geez. Yeah, that's Canada for you. That's Canada. Honestly.
Yeah.
Cecelia, thank you so much for coming and chatting with your favorite aunt on Kanoe Wanyai broadcast. And I will always call upon you to come and talk. To me, it's conversation. It's in the evening, and we have a conversation. We talk about things that matter to you and me as younger women, or women of today, if I may put it that way, because I'm not exactly young, but it's
you are still
fabulous.
Young.
Thank you. That's how I want to. That's how I feel. That's how I know me. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, and I will be inviting you again when something comes that I always follow you, and to me it's so important. To all our followers, you have a lovely evening from me, Sangwadzi Spirit Kachinza Mapfumo. I will see you again.
Thank you.